Hey beekeepers, I'm Jim too. Doing a short video here to support the comments that I had in the March 2022 issue of Bee Culture magazine. I apologize to you in that issue, and I specifically ask more than usual that people who read the article take time to look at this video, because I've really gone into an extreme here. This will be the third time I've discussed this concept with you. This model beehive here is 1/4 size. If I were in my bee yard, it would almost be to my nose, maybe higher. Keep in mind, I've got it on a hive stand about 20 inches off the ground. There's 3 brood nests, in this case 3 supers. It turns into a beautiful beehive. I run into issues. Number one, the supers are so high that I have trouble with my 73-year-old shoulders getting them off and managing all of these tens of thousands of bees in this beautiful beehive. I spent all my life beekeepingly learning to keep bees like this. Bigger was always better. More honey, more crop, more bees, more pollination, more of everything. Even though in the wild, this colony would have been gigantic in the wild, and it would have swarmed over and over and over and over again to have reduced its size to something more meaningful for it. So what I've run dead headlong into, never mind my ever-increasing age, my neighborhood's changing. Now this is not your problem, but it's mine. I've got new neighbors all over, up and down the street, new neighbors that I'm having to reintroduce to the fact that I've got bees back here. So don't let your kids go storming around back there, whatever. Just be a good neighbor. So I've got huge populations of bees. And yep, occasionally I lose swarms. So I have struggled with what to do about that, and with all the new neighbors and some new subdivisions going in, I think you really can't keep bees like I've always kept bees. I can't keep them that way because I'm older, and I can't keep them that way because my environment has changed. But let me tell you, beekeepers, the coup de grace that has made me, forced me, after all these years of thinking somehow I can get by, somehow I can do things that others have not done. When I have this big, beautiful beehive, I inadvertently grow big, beautiful populations of Varroa mites. Now, I'm going to be beaten up by researchers telling me, well, you should have done this something before you supered up. You should have done something during the winter. You should have done something just as spring started. You should have done something in the fall, before late summer. Yes, 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 and yes, I should have. But beekeeping, careful now, it's supposed to be enjoyable. And every time I open a book, every time I read a magazine, every time I do anything, well, you should have changed the comb. You should destroy a comb and replace it every 2 to 3 to 4 years. You ought to treat for Varroa. You need to requeen, or you monitor. Well, it's turning into work, beekeepers, and the ultimate insult is expensive to go buy these new queens and replace all this. For all of these reasons, I want to keep smaller bees. I love bees. There will never be a time in my life when there's not bees, I hope. So what I've come up with then, and the reason I've hammered on it so much, is that I want to downsize to something more like this, something friendlier. This is a bee colony where I can just go look at bees. I can photograph bees. I can do video work so you and I can talk about it without having to move hundreds of pounds of honey, go to tens of thousands of bees, crushing them, breaking burr comb apart, heavy comb, hurting my back, tearing up my shoulder, doing all that kind of work. This has all come at a time when I'm having to deal, as are so many of you, with winter losses. So this Varroa population I can't control, they're killing my bees. Primarily that's what's happening. They're not starving in the winter. So I'm in this loop of big, beautiful colonies with big, beautiful populations of Varroa mites that die big, beautiful deaths in the winter. They're not beautiful, they're ugly. Hard to clean up. I've had those of you out there, some of you have written me, who've been keeping bees in single deeps for the most part. You see, when I say single deeps, that means that you may winter them in 2 deeps, but you keep them down to 1 deep during the spring season, and you just super on top of that with an excluder on that I have here on this colony. So I force them to stay in 1 brood body. And in the article, I quote Amy M., who said that if some of them are going to swarm, and if they do, you just make splits on those, and then you hold those, and they grow their own queens, and that way you've got an extra queen if you need it, or you give it away, and then you can recombine them. And you didn't lose anything, and you had a queen if you needed it. Both Amy and others who keep bees in single deeps are also using this expanded polystyrene stuff, these heavy boxes. I brought this one in because it's old and it doesn't have a name on it, but it's readily available in the beekeeping supply catalogs. So we've also now able to help our bees survive the winter with insulated equipment, either expanded polystyrene or some kind of jacket that goes around, because in this thread that I'm pushing, going back to the old days in the 20s and 30s when beekeepers really doted on their bees during the winter, that we go back to some of that. Now, they would actually bury their bees, and we're not going to do that. Now, they would actually build bee cellars and put bees on wagons and back them into the cellar, leave them there, and then on nice days, pull them out, let them fly, and then back them back in. We're not going to do that. In the old days, these old beekeepers actually had bee rooms up in the top of their houses here in the Midwest, and the bee room was upstairs, and you lived with the bee colony in your house. We're not going to do that. But what I would like for us to consider doing is packing our bees better and helping them get through the winter, both on the bottom and on the top. You've already started doing that. There's all these new devices out there now for top quilts. Those quilts were old ideas, those battens. So we're basically going back now to when bees were valuable, hard to get. Queens were expensive. They were not established in the country with queen producers, and you had to be more careful with your bee populations than we do now then. But Varroa beekeepers, Varroa changed all that. They have systematically made bees expensive, and they have systematically made winter losses meaningful. They have made me keep fewer colonies because they're so much more difficult to manage, number one. And number two, I keep fewer colonies because they're so expensive. So Varroa has had a meaningful impact, and I have to admit that the traditional ways that was taught to keep bees in the mid-70s or so just simply does not work. Just supering up, giving all the space, viable queen, get them go crazy, let them make all this honey. They're going to die in the winter. And I've had to admit that. So I wanted you to watch, not because I'm trying to teach you something here. This is strictly a conversation. We are all in this together. So this is not me saying this is what you should be doing. This is me saying I have to do something, because what I have done now for almost 50 years and the last 10 years really has not worked well. Big beehives experience big deaths. That is in my operation. Where you are somewhere else in the country may be totally different. That's not what happens here. An irony, this was a gift, this bee colony. Model hive was a gift from LeGrant Bee Supplies. I'd like to acknowledge them in Ware, Massachusetts. They may not still be there as they were, but if anyone's watching from LeGrant Bee Supplies in Ware, I've still got this beehive, and when my bee lab opened in 1984, your company sent me a floral arrangement, and in my house right now, I still have the vine growing. That's the remnants of that floral arrangement. This shows you, in 1/4 model, what the beehive would look like This shows you in 1/4 model what I would like for my beehive to look like, so we can be, I and my bees, more at peace with each other. Thank you for watching this. I hope that you're finding your own pathway too. Whatever we do, beekeeping should be enjoyable for all of us. Bye-bye.